reputation than anyone who wants to solve it. He told me, you better watch yourself. And my wife worries about me being killed because I'm involved, and I've been vocal, and I haven't minced words because I try to be nice to people, and they treat you like fools. And I'm at 75, I'm past that point in my life. We got a terrible, terrible leadership in this police department. Miss Hammer over here, right, she's got a track record when she came over here. I don't know how she got appointed. You know, she worked for the DA and she's under a civil suit right now for judicial misconduct. You know, if you read the Eye in Albuquerque, you'll see that one of her investigators, you know, intimidated one of Paul Hayes' campaign workers, and Chief Banks even did it himself. You know, it's public knowledge, and it's brought to the mayor's attention. Both of these people should be fired, and they're not fired. And that tells you how seriously bad things are. You know, we're going to have a POC meeting on the 19th, or on Thursday. We got 19 more citizens who are going to get messed over again by the process. Not because of the good people on the POC that are trying hard, that, you know, some councilors wanted to do away with. Not because of them, but we got Ms. Hammer and her investigators and internal affairs that do corrupt investigations. They don't ask for recordings or anything like that. I made an IPRA request. I'll finish up. I made an IPRA request for recordings from Chief Schultz on Chief Banks on 27th of July. Supposed to be responded to in 15 days. He didn't even respond, not to this date. You know, you know, I asked for a copy of contract of Chief Schultz's consulting contract. It doesn't exist. I asked for a recording of the shooting of one man up on San Mateo. They won't give it to me. You got a problem. You got a very serious problem. And the reason people didn't come, a lot of people didn't come, or maybe think they did, and they showed up to see the DOJ, was they don't have confidence in you folks because of the composition. Rightly or wrongly, it's loaded with attorneys, it's loaded with too many former people, please talk to. And I'm not mixing words, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis.
Yes, Mr. Lippman, as you well know, my name's Kenneth Ellis, and I've been at this for quite a while. And just to elaborate on what Mr. D'Angelo was saying is this police department has a reputation of retaliating against anybody that speaks out against them. Yeah, they came after me on 3 different occasions. I could go into details, but you know, I've literally spoken to thousands of people, and that's why we're all here tonight, because the cat's out of the bag. We're all well aware of the problems that we have, and so your task is to recommend to the city council what kind of changes we can do to make this right. We have a POC meeting on Thursday. I'd recommend you guys come and sit down and take a look at this POC meeting and see how it goes. There's 20 CPCs. 20 citizen complaints coming up, and that's about average, and that's way too many for this per capita. I think if you guys are looking for ideas and suggestions, I think we ought to have mediation. We ought to have, you know, when we have a citizen complaining, we ought to sit down and mediate, talk about it. Why are you complaining? Let's get the officer, let's get the citizen, and let's talk about that mediation. That's just for a CPC. If we have a police shooting, I think there should be a preliminary hearing. I think that would be, I mean, if we're going to suggest things, let's suggest things that work. I mean, let's make this right. Let's make this right for our police department and for our community. And I think with mediation and with preliminary hearing, I think that would be a step in the right direction. So, you know, if anybody has any questions, I'm open for questions.
Any questions?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Ellis, could you talk a little bit more about your preliminary hearing suggestion? What do you envision?
Well, just the same thing that happens with the civilian, with the citizen. I mean, it shouldn't be no different than if a citizen has, you know, a charge that needs to be a hearing on it. Let's talk about it. Let's sit down and let's have a bilateral conversation about it. Let's decide what, if there needs to be an indictment, or if there needs to be, you know, charges brought up, I don't think it should be any different for a law enforcement officer than it should be for a citizen. I think the process should be the same.
That's interesting. Is that within the jurisdiction of this body? A preliminary hearing seems to be something that, you know, we've heard before, that's come up on Police Oversight Commission and City Council meetings and discussions. So my question to this body is a preliminary hearing within our jurisdiction? And is that something that, say, for example, somebody filed a complaint through the POC process, could we refer that to a preliminary hearing process? And how do we collaborate with the district attorney's office in order to make that a reality?
Let me try and answer that. And actually, the next item on the agenda will help clarify this and other issues. This task force is charged with recommending changes to the police oversight process to the city council. We are not the Police Oversight Commission. We're not the training force for the police department. We are simply charged with, not simply, it's a very big, complicated job, but we are confined to recommending changes to the police oversight process. We have no authority to implement change, and we have no authority to intervene in the current process. And staff can correct me if I'm wrong about that.
That, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. However, and this is big, however, the task force is directed and intended to provide, in addition to amendments to the ordinance, suggestions that might go beyond the ordinance. For example, suggestions on how the union contract or the collective bargaining agreement might be structured. And I was hearing out of the corner of my ear here that there might be some, there is a process for hearings embedded in the collective bargaining agreement. That may be something that the task force might want to look at and comment on.
Yeah, but just for clarification, for my own clarification as chair, that's something along with a whole lot of other things, mediation process, subpoena authority, et cetera, that can go into recommendations that we make. But do we have any authority to make recommendations that could be implemented in the current process?
Sure.
Because I think that's what some of the folks are asking us.
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Can we intervene?
I'm not sure I follow the
Okay,
question.
let me make it as simple as I can. Some members of the public have asked, there are some people who want the current Police Oversight Commission suspended. Mr. Ellis this evening is recommending two processes, a mediation process and a hearing if a shooting is involved. I don't know if those are currently covered in the current ordinance or not. In any case, whether it is or it isn't, if we wanted to make a recommendation like that, could it be implemented? I'll call it.
That's a good question. I'd ask Mr. Melendez, our attorney, to
Mr. Chair, Task Force, I think that the task force should feel free to explore those types of things and make those types of recommendations. At this point, it's not really clear how that process would end up shaking out at the back end as far as what can specifically be done. I think the council may be looking for some advice with respect to the current process or with respect to a future process that may be implemented. But I know that there are certain restrictions right now. Ms. Hammer and I were just discussing that there are certain restrictions right now with respect to whether or not a hearing would be appropriate given the process that's in place. But that doesn't mean that the task force couldn't recommend that that should be changed.
Gotcha. Okay. Mr. Wang.
I have a question for Mr. Ellis on exactly what you meant by preliminary hearing. You mentioned indictment in almost the same breath. And I just want to say, are you talking about a preliminary hearing to establish probable cause for a criminal charge?
Well, basically what I'm looking for is, for instance, in my son's shooting case, there was no rebuttal against what was brought forth as evidence. And so I would look for, you know, I would look for a preliminary hearing so that we can determine if there should be an indictment, if there should be.
Okay, then you're talking about a preliminary hearing to establish probable cause for a criminal charge, as opposed to a grand jury hearing to do the same.
Well, you know, the grand jury process obviously hasn't worked. It was shut down because it didn't work. So, I mean,
But are you talking about moving towards a criminal charge against an officer?
well, there needs to be a preliminary hearing to see.
Is that
if
what you're
there's-
talking about?
I'm talking about having a second, or having the shooter, having a mediation, having a discussion on
Well,
whether
there's
there
two-
should be.
There's two separate issues, and I'm trying to clarify. If you're talking about a potential criminal charge against an officer involved in a shooting, an officer involved in a shooting can be charged with a felony either by a grand jury indictment or by a preliminary hearing. And the choice of whether to have either one and which one to have lies with the district attorney, and we have, I mean, maybe we can make a recommendation to the district attorney, but who knows what if the district attorney would listen to that. If you're talking about some other process involving city oversight of its own police force that is separate from criminal charges, then that may be something that with more discussion and clarification of what you're looking for, we might be able to do. But we need to separate the idea of the criminal charge from the city oversight, because those are two very different issues, and the DA controls the criminal.
Well, the bottom line is that we've had officers shoot individuals in the back, and it's been justified. The DA, the district attorney's office, the grand jury process, none of this is, there's no justice in this. It's not been
What I
a
heard
fair
was,
process.
Could you raise your hand so I can go on? I got Ralph and then Mr. Jenkins.
okay, what I heard is that he's asked us to consider a preliminary process where there's evidence presented on both sides of the issue, the defense and the prosecution, and the evidence is weighed, and then potentially an indictment is levied. That's what I'm hearing here. Otherwise, what's the purpose of a preliminary hearing? So I think that the purpose is to hear both sides of the evidence and render a potential indictment.
The way it's been working is that an officer shoots somebody, and then the internal review orchestrates a story on how that shooting took place, and there's no rebuttal to what's being presented to the DA or as evidence. We have to take their word for it and what's going on, and for instance, in my son's case, what they said happened and what actually happened are two different things, and so I'm looking to get the side of the victims, or get a rebuttal to actually what's been presented.
Okay.
So I
Mr.
feel like the
Simons.
hearing would do that.
Mr. Ellis, I wanted to turn to the issue of mediation that you raised. If you look at the 2011 report that MGT did about the police oversight process, they found that the use of mediation had dropped off pretty significantly since 2005. And it seemed to coincide with the fact that we have police officers serving as mediators in most of the instances. I'm curious if, in your view of the use of mediation and its effectiveness, if you think that's an effective way for mediation to take place. And I also wonder, according to the study, they also found that, at least nationally, the use of mediation has not been terribly successful. In fact, I guess there's only a couple of instances throughout the country where civilian overview processes like this have successfully used mediation in a substantial number of cases. Otherwise, it evidently, they found that the highly polarized nature of citizen complaints makes it very difficult to carry out regular mediation. So I'm curious, just based on those findings, whether that affects at all your feelings about the use of mediation.
Yeah, well, basically, all I'm saying is that we have citizens that are complaining, and those complaints aren't, the process is, we're not getting due process on it. I don't know what the answer is. that's, greater minds than mine are gonna figure that out, but we need to definitely, research and figure out how we can, first and foremost, lower the citizen complaints by having the mandatory lapel cameras and, let's, let's start from there and let's, the problem is multifaceted, as you all know, so, I don't really know what the answers are, but I think somehow or another, we should be able to keep these citizen complaints from going all the way to the Police Oversight Commission. If an officer and the civilian are able to talk about it, maybe they will be able to come to an agreement where, I don't know what the answers
Okay,
are.
let me address this, because we have a lot of business to conduct. I think that's a good suggestion. I think we should look into it, see what our scope is in maybe being able to do that. Peter, I read something very different than that. I read of another community, and I don't remember where I read it. There's voluminous materials here, where actually that was very successful mediation, where they brought the complainant together with the police officer, and they were able to resolve a lot of things that needed to go no further. In fact, in some cases, they never even went to the equivalent of the Police Oversight Commission. They just resolved it between them.
I mean, if I may, I have some skepticism about the use of mediation in these kinds of civil rights instances. Beyond that, I just say that, I just refer you to page 4-6 of the MGT 2011 study, where
Okay.
it makes a pretty strong case against mediation.
Okay, we'll look into it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that a really good reference would be the International Association of Chiefs of Police, because there are international studies that address those kinds of issues. And if somebody's interested in that kind of issue, you can get those right on their website.
Well, maybe you could review that and bring back that information to the task force.
I can do that.
That'd be great. Okay, thank you, Mr. Ellis. Mr. Tannenbaum. Yes, sir. You're up. You have 5 minutes. There'll be a bell when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you, sir. My name's Arthur Tannenbaum. You may recall I introduced myself as a member of the public. I'm a United States citizen. First of all, I want to recognize there are a lot of brilliant minds here, from what I can tell. Everybody presented their credentials at the introductory meeting. And if I may, I'd like to express my immeasurable respect and admiration for Mr. Ellis, who has attended the Albuquerque City Council meetings, was at the introductory meeting for this task force, and notices here again tonight, working for the greater good. Some of the passion at the introductory meeting you may have witnessed, including my own speaking, made it seem like anger. I introduced myself as a white guy, in case you hadn't noticed, and I got some laughs. Of course, everybody noticed. I'm not exactly a white guy. My surname is Tannenbaum. That's a Jewish name. My father is of Jewish heritage. My mother is Presbyterian. So Mr. Littman and Mr. Simonson, I presume, and forgive me if I'm wrong, you guys are Jewish. You may not consider me Jewish. So I'm in the middle. When I came to the introductory meeting, I was wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt. Now I'm dressed in a more professional, business-like fashion. Image means a lot. Now you people down here downtown, or people in corporate settings and government settings, may look upon this type of attire more favorably. Up in the Southeast Heights, I may be seen more favorably if I'm wearing a cool t-shirt and blue jeans. I strongly urge the task force to expand to 15 members. Mr. Simonson was not present at the introductory meeting. I understand there are extenuating circumstances. I noticed last night when I tried to find the the meeting minutes online, they were not available. So, I know it's not a perfect world. Okay, I have a wide variety of experiences. I've worked in professional settings. I've also worked in blue collar. Again, I'm in the middle. My mother's from Virginia Presbyterian. My father in New York City Jew. I'm in the middle. I've worked as a radical advocate, as a radical political activist. When I say radical, I mean working from the inside out. I would encourage some members of the task force to very seriously consider working from the inside out. It's an arduous task and usually time-consuming. Thing is, most people start out with an overview and work their way in. So if certain people or certain elements would create barriers, or maybe some sort of camouflage, that's pretty much the way they're created. So I would certainly recommend getting inside as far as possible. Mr. Arianas.
Yes.
Hello, sir.
How you doing?
Good, thanks. I'm a little nervous. I'm not so nervous because I don't have as much time constraint. I appreciate that. I appreciate your valuable time. Mr. Arianas brought up the fact there's only one Latino member on the task force. That is not representative of the public. This task force is representing the city council, if I'm not mistaken, which represents the citizens and members of the public in this city. Another man brought up what I thought was a very good point. There's no youth represented. A lot of the problems have been focused on young Latinos, young black men, some mentally ill people. Believe me when I tell you, I'm a curious man, and I've had some peculiar people offer me help, people of all sorts. I lived in Nob Hill for 7.5 years before living in the International District for the past 4 years. I've got to tell you that the people in the International District in the Southeast Heights, some of them who would be considered low class, watch my back, kindly offer me help, much more than the people in Nob Hill. So, thank you for your public service.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, if there are no questions for Mr. Tannenbaum, I'm going to move on with the agenda. We're finished with public comment. We're up to number 5, which is mission and vision statement. Task force members, if you'll look in your packet, you'll see 2 documents that I'm going to reference. One is a mission statement, and the other one's a vision statement. Let me start by saying helping you to understand what the 2 things are and the difference between them. The mission statement is intended to guide our work. So this is our mission, and I'll read it aloud once I get through explaining. So this is to guide our work. Everything that we do, all of our speakers, public comment, should be gauged against fulfilling this mission statement. I'm going to read it aloud. You can follow along with me. Police Oversight Task Force Mission Statement. The mission of the Police Oversight Task Force, as stated in R-13-143, is to review and recommend to the City Council changes to the City of Albuquerque's mechanism of police oversight. The task force will fulfill its mission by engaging citizens in open and transparent public forums, by developing a thorough understanding of the city's existing police oversight processes and potential areas for improvement, by researching best practices and alternative oversight models from around the state and country, and by making recommendations on ways to improve the police oversight system to the City Council. That's our mission, and it's taken almost verbatim from the resolution R-13-143. I'm going to separate these 2 items out and ask for a motion to approve this mission statement, and then we can discuss it. So I need the motion first.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second? Well, there were two people moving, so I'll take that as a move and a second. And it's open for discussion.
Point of order.
Yes, sir.
I believe we need to have, for purposes of minutes and public record, specific names of the person who moved and the person who seconded, rather than just two people. And I didn't catch who did it.
Yeah,
I made the-
Ralph
made the
moved
motion
and
and-
Peter seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay. Mr. Wagner?
I'll have to think about something, but I believe that the second sentence is not appropriately part of mission statement. It simply cites procedures, and I don't think that procedures are part of the mission statement. I think the mission statement is goals, and I think the goals need to be expanded, but I don't think that the second sentence about how the task force will fulfill the mission is appropriately part of the mission statement.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments? Yes.
I think a better operationalization of police oversight,
Can you speak a little louder?
a better to clarify police oversight task force, because it's one thing to recommend changes to the current police oversight committee, but if you're going to do police oversight, I think it also requires some understanding of evaluations used at hire, what type of psychological evaluations are used. There are international standards. I think it requires understanding of the demographics, officers per citizen, per area, and things like that. And so my recommendation is that we don't simply narrow it to recommendations to the police oversight current committee, but also general police oversight.
I think that may be beyond our purview. This language is taken from the actual resolution, and it defines what we do. I don't think that we can, we're empowered legally even, to make changes. We can recommend changes, the conversation I had earlier, and see how that process works itself out. But I don't think it would be proper to put in our mission that we're going to make changes. We can only really make recommendations. And I understand what you're saying. All of those things need to be considered and probably included in our final recommendations, but not as part of the mission. That's how I would explain it anyway. Other comments?
Mr. Chair, I understand Mr. Wagner's concerns about the mission statement, and I think they're well put. I'm not particularly troubled by them. Unless there's a problem with that particular language, it wouldn't bother me to have that language in the mission statement.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Wagner?
I would like to add to the end of the first sentence, and I'll read the sentence and then propose my language. The mission of the Police Oversight Task Force, as stated in R-13-143, is to review and recommend to the City Council changes to the City of Albuquerque's mechanism of police oversight that will improve and ensure accountability, transparency, communication, and mutual trust between the police and the community.
It's fine with me. It's an awfully long sentence, but I don't see anything objectionable in what you just added. Any other comments about that, about what Mr. Wagner would like us to add? Yes, sir.
He made his sentence, his extended sentence, he made a couple points. One being transparency, and what was the other one? The way I heard it.
Accountability, transparency, communication, and mutual trust between police and the community.
I guess what I'm looking at is you're saying improve accountability. We all want accountability. That should be there. That's a given. But to say to improve it is as if you're saying it doesn't exist. The way I hear it. I like transparency, and if you could change it somehow to where assured accountability or something. I just, the way you read it to me, makes me believe you're saying there is no accountability.
That's not my intent,
And that's what I
Next,
hear.
let him answer, okay.
I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to improve accountability. I think that's why we're here, is because there's a lack of accountability.
See,
And I
that's
think-
what I
No,
hear.
no, and I think that that's already been determined with the current police oversight process, which is why we've been formed to address that.
And I disagree with that.
Further discussion?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
one person should be speaking at a time. I'm seeing members on the task force interrupting one
No,
another. That's
no
what
one
I,
has interrupted anybody.
is that a fact?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm keeping pretty tight control here, but thank you for your observation. Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'm gonna ask for a motion.
Well, I would ask if, is it Mr. Arianis's motion?
Right.
I would ask if Mr. Arianis would accept my language as a friendly amendment.
I do.
Okay?
Can you read?
So what I'm gonna have,
the motion?
yeah, I was gonna say, what I'd like to have is the full motion read. So you've made the changes, it's one add-on to the first sentence, so why don't you read the full mission statement, and if our note taker can take down what he's at, thank you.
The mission of the Police Oversight Task Force is stated in R-13-143 is to review and recommend to the City Council changes to the City of Albuquerque's mechanism of police oversight that will improve and ensure accountability, transparency, communication, and mutual trust between the police and the community. And then no change to the second sentence.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, we have the revised mission statement, so I'm gonna ask for a vote. All those in favor of accepting the revised mission statement as our mission statement, please say aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, there was one opposition, the rest were in favor. So the motion passes and we've accepted a mission statement for our task force. Thank you very much. Now on to the vision statement. I wanted to have a vision statement as well, because the vision statement functions as kind of a guiding light. It's the thing that we want to keep in mind to ultimately achieve. You've incorporated some of the ideas, Mr. Wagman, in the mission statement now. But I'm proposing the following vision statement. Albuquerque, a city safe and secure with a first-rate police department. Now again, this isn't our mission, but rather our vision, what we'd like to see ultimately happen out of the work of the police oversight process. I'll read it one more time. Albuquerque, a city safe and secure with a first-rate police department. And with that, I'll ask for a motion and then we can discuss it.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Lloyd moved to approve.
Second.
Mr. Arianis seconded. So I'll now open it up for discussion. Any,
Mr. Chair,
yes, sir.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but shouldn't the vision be about the police oversight, or shouldn't it be about the Police Oversight Commission? What our vision is for the Police Oversight Commission?
Yes, it doesn't have to relate directly to our work. It's, as I explained, at least this is how I'm defining it, as kind of a guiding principle. Our work is guided by the mission statement that we just hammered out. So this is kind of like, well, is what we're doing, are the recommendations we're making going to further the vision of a safe and secure city with a first-rate police department? It's a vision. It's a big picture thing, not necessarily specific to this task force, but generally applied to the Police Oversight Commission, the District Attorney, the police force, etc. That's how I'm seeing it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I think the city safe and secure is beyond the scope of what we're looking at, because that just doesn't depend on law enforcement or the judicial system, but appropriate treatment for mental health, secure treatment for people with substance abuse problems and disabilities, and I think that's far beyond what we're discussing.
Right, well, again, and if it's too complicated, I'll just drop it. We don't have to have a vision statement. But again, what I'm trying to do here is have kind of a guiding light for our work. We're not going to, as I've said, we can't make this happen. It's only a way to guide our work. This is what we would like to see happen to the city of Albuquerque. And again, I know you raise the same issue every time with the stuff that we've looked at. And we have to take into account the mentally ill, et cetera. None of that is covered in this vision statement. It's very broad and global. So I hope I'm making myself clear. Yes,
Mr. Chair, if I may, I personally, I think it would be, I understand vision statements. However, I think for our purpose, I think that the amendments that were added to the mission statement and accepted in terms of what we are trying to do, improve and ensure accountability, transparency, communication, and mutual trust between the police and the community, to me, that is our mission and our goal, and holding that as a vision, I think, is really pretty profound, and it's focused. So, although I understand kind of a broader vision for the community as a whole, I think for our purpose, it would be really good to focus on the incredibly large task ahead of us, which I believe our amended mission statement addresses and would.
Well, I really don't want to get into a debate about this. The things that were added to the mission statement don't begin to cover a city safe and secure with the first-rate police department.
I like it because a vision statement should show some kind of a goal or destiny. It's what we're trying to accomplish overall. You know, we can always, there's always ways you can put words in about race, religion, color, creed, handicap, whatnot, but the bottom line is, it's the big picture about what we're trying to accomplish, without putting in a bunch of different terminology and categories. It's about the city, and then everybody that's within the city, regardless of race, religion, color, creed, you know, sexual orientation.
After
Are
hearing
you
the
finished, Mr. Ryan?
Yeah, thank you.
after hearing the argument, particularly that voiced by Mr. Simonson, I'm gonna withdraw my motion to approve.
You didn't, did you move to, were you the one who moved to approve it?
Yes.
Okay. Good question. Do we need I guess we could have another motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the vision statement as stated.
Okay, second? Is there a second to the motion? Okay, the motion dies with, for lack of a second. And we will not have a vision statement. We only have a mission statement. Okay, let's move on. Number 6 on the agenda is general roadmap for the work of the task force. And I'm going to ask task force member Fabrizio Bertoletti, who prepared this document, and it's in your packet, by the way, to kind of walk us through this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, it is a draft, and it's for just to get started talking about where we're going, and trying to actually, the way I started it was trying to structure my own, organize my own thoughts about how to approach this pretty significant task that is before us. So it's self-explanatory. It is general and very schematic in nature, and obviously could be a start to prepare a work plan, a real work plan with names and dates and so on, and more specific tasks. The type in blue was added, and I'm thankful for whoever did that. Mr. Chairman, maybe it was you, maybe it was staff, but it helps kind of define the schematic a little better, and I have absolutely no problem with any of that. though, let me point out a couple of things. One on task number 4. I really, my intention there was to request a written report about the recommendations that were made in previous reports, like the MGT and Walker Luna. I did that because in reading the material, in particular on the 2011 report from MGT, the recommendations were frequently followed by the statement that this recommendation was also made in the 07 report, and which led me to think that, in fact, that particular recommendation had not been implemented. So what I would like to see, in addition to potential presenters as outlined here, I would like to have a report that goes right through, one by one, the recommendations that were made, where they implemented, what was the result of that implementation, a qualitative statement about that recommendation is good, well, whatever happened, and in particular, those recommendations that were not implemented. There may be very good reasons why they were not, but I'd like to know what those are. And I think in a written report would be really helpful to me and probably the whole task force to see it in black and white. And it doesn't have to be overly lengthy.
Let me make a comment about that. I don't want to interrupt your report, but just so you know, and the rest of the members of the task force know, I have requested that of Bruce and his people. I've asked them to put together a report, a written report, that brings together all of the recommendations from the 3 formal studies that have been done, as well as transmittal documents that went with one of the studies from the city administration, and recommendations that have come in from the public, like Mr. Delangelo has asked us to look at. And that all of those be combined into one report and given to us so we can look at them. Because you're right, there are repeated things over the course of the last 10 years, recommendations that have been made repeatedly but have not been implemented. And it may help focus our work to see, well, over the last 10 years, this thing's been recommended, 5 times and nobody's implemented it. Why? So I've asked for a document that brings together all of the recommendations so we can look at them.
Mr. Chair, on that point, it seems to me that beyond just the recommendations that have been made and the correspondence maybe that's taken place between the city, or the city council and the administration, I think we need a sense of what the city council's deliberation has been on those recommendations. Because it's not clear to me that any of those recommendations have been fulfilled, and if they have, why some were left off and some weren't. Was that the result of a city council decision or an executive decision? I think we have to have a sense of what the deliberation has been that has resulted in where we are today.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it is a good
Mr.
point.
Perlman, can you, when you bring together recommendations from the reports that have been submitted to City Council, is it, I'm sure the record is there must be minutes from the City Council meetings, to enlighten the recommendations report? What was it implemented or wasn't, and if it wasn't, why wasn't it?
I don't know if backup exists for that or not. I'll have to take that up with the council staff to see.
Mr. Chairman, I think, I agree with doing, if he's doing that already, that's great. On the other hand, I think that as we talk about accountability, the people that are actually responsible for implementing recommendations that come out of reports are the people that are in charge. So I would like to see a report from APD, probably the chief's office, outlining their reasons why. And they would have the information that Mr. Perlman may not have in terms of their relationship with the city council and how they may or may not have implemented because of action of the city council. So I still would like to see a report from APD on those things beyond what Mr. Perlman is gonna be doing, which is very helpful, don't get me wrong.
Okay, let me let John respond, and then Nancy, I'll call him.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Burley, the council staff has worked with the IRO already on something like that, based on the recommendations from the 2011 report. And we've got general summaries of the recommendations and whether they've been followed through. And we could provide that to the task force.
Exactly on that point, there's a piece here that maybe I'm missing, or there's a nuance or something. It seems to me, and we now have in our packet that for everybody to share, that these recommendations, many of the recommendations from the 2011 report were made in a transmittal to the mayor to the city council, and then backed up by the mayor. What I don't understand is literally what happens with recommendations that get made. Where do they go? It seems to me that and this is the layers that I'm trying to understand. So forgive me if I'm trying to understand this. So if recommendations are made to the city council, and that's our job, is to make recommendations to the city council. So once they're made to the city council, what does the city council do? Is there an action? Is there a discussion? Is there a vote? So that every one of those recommendations has an up or down vote by the city council? And then essentially so that it would be either adopted by the next step, might be amending the ordinance in some way. So I'm trying to understand the mechanics of what happens when recommendations are made. Because it seems like we're in the same position, in some respects, repeating what MGT has done, to make recommendations. Where do they go? What happens to them? What are the decisions about it? Or it seems to be implied somehow that it would be up to the IRO or up to the police department to say, yeah, we want to do them, or no, we don't. But it seems to me that what we're looking for is the official action taken by the city council based on recommendations that have been made before, and what happened to them.
I just want to say, and John, thank you for that, but I'm not sure that a list of what recommendations have made and whether they've been acted upon is adequate. I think at least what I'm looking for is some sense of why those decisions were made to enact some,
I think you said they
not
had that.
to enact others. Some of that may have taken place in the context of the city council, but on the other hand, I imagine that many of these recommendations aren't legislated. They're part of rulemaking at some level, so maybe the POC is charged with accepting or rejecting and writing rules for and implementing some of these recommendations. So there's, just as Nancy's pointing out, there are probably many different layers in which some of this decision making is happening.
Okay, we'll let John respond.
Mr. Chairman,
I see you still.
That's exactly right. There are multiple levels of responsibility for the recommendations. I hope when the task force work is done, that there'll be recommendations for the council in terms of amendments to existing ordinances, or in terms of budget appropriations to strengthen the city's financial commitment to a certain recommendation. But then there are also going to be recommendations that are necessarily under the purview of the administration, organizational issues that are under the mayor and the administration. There are going to be recommendations, I think, that fall on the folks who are sitting across the bargaining table from the APOA, and recommendations that need to be implemented in that context. And then there are going to be recommendations that deal with policy, standard operating procedure, and things like that. So the long answer to your question, Nancy, is that there are multiple levels of responsibility. What will happen with the task force's report is it'll be put in what's called an OC, a communication to the council. The council will discuss it. The task force will present it. There'll be discussion there, and then it'll be up to the various parties to actually implement it. If there are legislative changes, there'll be a counselor who may be interested in sponsoring that legislation or that ordinance change.
Let me make a comment. I'm going to use the chair to do this, because I think I see where this is heading, and it's a concern I had from the get-go, and I'll just lay it out as cold and as clear as I can. Too often, task forces, committees, et cetera, are formed and their recommendations are never implemented. That's exactly what we're talking about, recommendations that haven't been implemented. Sometimes task forces are formed with that very objective, just to take the heat off of something so that people can sit around and talk about it and there's no intent to implement any changes. So one of the things that I intend to do is charge this task force as we move forward with grappling how to ensure that our recommendations are adhered to. That will be our task, because if we don't come to grips with that, once we submit a report, anything can happen with it. So I want us to grapple with, Nancy, to answer your question, what does it happen, where does it go from us? And how do we make sure that it gets implemented? I think we have to take that responsibility, because we can't be sure of what's gonna happen when something leaves our hands. So further down the road, I want us to grapple with that subject, that it's not a report that just gets shelved. And let me ask a procedural question. Mr. Delangelo keeps raising his hand. Can I call on people in the public?
If you like.
Okay, Mr. Delangelo.
Just a short answer.
Yes,
You're
short
right.
answer, please.
You're right, Mr. Chairman. The short answer is the report, and I've tracked it, and other people have tracked the management report since it was done, and that sort of thing. The short answer of it, it was sent to by the council because it's required. An oversight review is supposed to be required every 4 years or 3 years. The only thing that was done, it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was sent from the council, the report, to the chief and executive office, and they made the decision what to implement it. There was no legislation that came before the council on yes, we'll adopt this, no, we'll adopt that. The chief had the full discretion to ignore
Okay.
what he wanted to, and that's exactly what happened.
Okay, well, speaking as the chair, I don't want to see that happen. I want to see if we're going to take the time and the energy, at least from where I'm sitting, to come up with recommendations. I want to make sure that they have a good hearing and that we do all that we can to ensure that our recommendations are implemented. I think, yeah, you raise your hand, and then Mr. Tannenbaum, and then Mr. Simonson.
Okay. Partly in the interest of making sure that something gets done and that what gets done is important. If we're going to have presenters from people who did the reports, one thing that stands out in the reports is there's recommendations about the police department, recommendations about the complaint process, recommendations about the police oversight commission, and they are grouped according to subject matter. And even within subject matter, they are not necessarily grouped in order of what the evaluator thought was important. And in another context, if you have somebody evaluating a building that you want to use for a store, and they go into room 1, and you need to sweep the floor, and you go into then it gets to room 4, it says brace up the load-bearing wall that's about to collapse. Well, as you're reading the report, it's clear what's more important than the other, but it's buried because of the structure of the report. I would like to see somebody come back to us and not just list by subject matter area, but list by order of importance what's crucial, what has to get done, what is there without it, nothing else, everything's gonna fail. And what can you put off to another day? You don't have to make the decision right now. And we're not getting that out of those reports.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, and I want to just postpone that for a minute till we get to the next item on the agenda, item 7, which recommends some speakers. And in the course of inviting people to speak, we could ask them to formulate their comments along your suggestion. So let me get back to Mr. Bertoletti and let him finish with his roadmap.
You had people that wanted to speak on
yes.
that point.
Mr. Tannenbaum.
Mr. Lippman, I think you made a very good point. It was phrased as a question. I don't know how rhetorical the question is. In order to ensure that the task force's recommendations are implemented, where do we go from here? To the Albuquerque City Council. The City Council is the main governing body of the city of Albuquerque. And it's my understanding that the City Council is going to step back or abdicate their responsibility to this task force. I would defer to Mr. Loy and encourage you to ask and listen to what Mr. Loy has to say, as he has served on the City Council in the past. Thank you.
With all due respect, I did not put it in form of a question.
You said, where does it go
I made it a
from here?
declaration saying that I'm going to charge the task force with making sure that their recommendations are implemented. I know that we know that it goes to the city council from us. That's where the report will go. But I think we need to
Perhaps I misunderstood when you said, where does it go from here?
I don't think I'm the one who said that, but it doesn't matter. I understand what you're saying. Other comments on this particular subject,
So,
Mr.
just
Simon?
briefly, I very much appreciate the roadmap that's been laid out here. I think I would just caution against us trying to do an exhaustive review of police oversight mechanisms, of potential models, and so on and so forth. It seems to me that with these recommendations that we've gotten from MGT, we've got the place to start. And I would urge us to start there and give those careful consideration, and we'll get to this in the next agenda item, but perhaps actually organize what other input we get from consultants, from city staff, whatever it might be, in conjunction with those recommendations. I would hate to see us lose the opportunity to capitalize on all the work that MGT has done. We're never going to do as exhaustive a study as what MGT has done, and we should take full advantage of it.
True, that's why I've asked for that summary to be done, so that we can hopefully take advantage of that. Okay.
Okay, so.
Did you want to continue?
Yeah, I would actually insist, however, that the discussion that we just had demonstrates to me that there is, is the city council, is this other, it's this, is that, it's the other. Who is responsible for implementing recommendations is the top administrator of whatever department we're talking about. In this case, we're talking about APD. And I would like them to report in writing. It doesn't need to be that complicated. Just, what is it why they didn't, they didn't implement certain recommendations. There may be very good reasons why. I think we need to know.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so I would insist that that's a point that I think we should get some kind of a report in writing, and then they can qualify it by the presenters anywhere
So
they want.
noted.
Okay, so, and then the last comment I have is on task 6. When I say personnel relations, I'm talking about exactly what has already come up earlier in the meeting, and that is the union contract, because I think we need to be very cognizant of what is in those contracts. Those are subjects of long negotiating sessions over time, and to the extent that this task force may come up with a recommendation that is in contrast or contrary to those things, I think we need to be aware of it. It's not that we wouldn't be able to make that recommendation, but we need to be aware of the implementability of our recommendations as well. So that's the last comment I have on my write-up.
Okay. Any questions for?
I wanted to follow up.
Go ahead.
I think that the reason why a lot of these suggestions or recommendations in the past weren't followed through is because it doesn't seem like the path or the process for them was clearly defined. And so what I think we need to do early on is establish a process that says once we have established these recommendations, that it goes through A, B, C, D, the city council votes for it on it, the mayor signs a resolution, and it goes. Because if we leave it, put it in the hands of the chief of police, as it has been done in the past, I think that there's probably not gonna be much movement or much of a change, and all our work is gonna be for naught. And so I think we have to define a process that says our recommendations will go A, B, C, D, you know, and then go from there.
Well, that's kind of what I meant. I don't know how that'll come out, but I do want this task force to grapple with how do we ensure that they get implemented.
Right, thank you.
I'm gonna make a suggestion here and see how this flies. I think that you've done a very good roadmap, thank you very much, we really appreciate it. I think what we're gonna need, and we're gonna need it fairly quickly, maybe based on the skeleton of this work and some of the comments that have been made this evening, we're gonna need an actual work plan, where you have tasks and people assigned and timelines, et cetera. It's like a management plan. And what I'd like to suggest is that Mr. Bertolini, you and whoever else would like to volunteer, work with Mr. Perlman to develop that management plan and bring it back to the task force for review and approval. So I'm gonna put that on the table now. Are there other folks that would like to work on a management plan for the task force? Peter, okay, Fabrizio, you got a partner, Peter. Also, let me say this, I do have the ability to appoint task force, subcommittees. So, when I do appoint a subcommittee, I'm taking the position as chair to act as ex officio on any subcommittee that I form. Now, there's misunderstanding about that term, so I'm gonna explain it. Ex officio means by virtue of the office. So because I'm the chair, by virtue of my office, I have full rights on any subcommittee. So I can come to the meetings, I can vote, I'm just like a committee member. So you'll actually have three. I may not come to all the meetings if we got a lot of subcommittees, but I'm willing to help with that as well. Does anybody else want to help? Ralph, would you like to help with that? Is that why you're raising your hand?
Yeah, that will,
Yeah.
that's not what I'm
Okay. I don't mean to force you into something if you don't want to do it.
No,